Rest in peace, George Foreman. I'm wearing the sunglasses because my eye is not good at the moment, but I wanted to make this tribute in a timely manner. So we lost George Foreman just a few days ago on March 21st, 2025. Not only did we lose a heavyweight champion of the world, we lost an incredible human being. I'd like to reflect on the lifetimes that George Foreman had within his singular boxing career. Let's go back to the beginning. George Foreman was an Olympic medalist, Olympic gold medalist, represented the United States, and I think that image of the young George Foreman walking around the ring victorious with the little American flag, I think that's an iconic image. It showed us that, George Foreman was not only triumphant, but he was also patriotic American. In a second phase of his career, as George rose through the ranks and was about to face off with Muhammad Ali, he chose to play the role of the bad guy, so to speak, in the sense that he appeared surly. In some ways, I think he tried to fashion himself after Sonny Liston and adopt a sort of mean, surly demeanor. This came through especially in the documentary When We Were Kings. It's about George Foreman and Muhammad Ali's epic fight in Kinshasa, in that documentary, it's revealed that one aspect of George's behavior that kind of set him up as the bad guy was that he decided to bring a couple of his dogs over to Africa with him for his training camp. And apparently, especially that breed of dog that George had, made the local folks very uneasy, I think, because those were the dogs that were used to chastise them by government and law enforcement. So of course that chant that you would hear throughout that film is, Ali Bombaye, which means Ali, kill him. They're referring to Foreman. So, Foreman got cast as the bad guy for the Rumble in the Jungle. And sure enough, even though perhaps the betting odds were in Foreman's favor because he was known to have incredible power, so the logic at the time was that Foreman would knock out Ali, who'd been out of the ring for 3 years because he'd been imprisoned due to his refusal to be drafted for the Vietnam War. And it was during this Rumble in the Jungle that Ali came up with his infamous rope-a-dope, much to the chagrin of every boxing trainer from that point forward, because it's absolutely not a good thing for a fighter to do, to put themselves against the ropes like Ali did during that fight with Foreman. But of course, Ali knew what he was doing. He was incredibly skillful. It was a tactical move on his part, and he knocked out Foreman in a devastating manner in the Rumble in the Jungle. In a third phase of George Foreman's career, he then decided to step away from the ring in 1977, and he devoted himself to the church and to community service. Complete change of character. Seems that he did a 180 from that sort of mean, surly guy to a loving father figure devoted to God. And then when he decided 10 years later, in 1987, to make a comeback, George was kind of mocked because he was about, 350 pounds at the time. He was 37 years old, so of course he was going to get doubted by boxing fans and media alike. But Foreman plodded away on that comeback trail, had a couple notable wins. He had a notable loss to Evander Holyfield, losing a 12-round decision, but that loss kind of cemented him as a valid heavyweight contender once again. And then lo and behold, Michael Moorer dethroned Evander Holyfield, and subsequently the match between Michael Moorer and George Foreman was made. And that's probably the fight that perhaps that George Foreman is most well known for, is that 10th round KO of Michael Moorer. George called it and told, I think, some of the boxing journalists that he would knock out Michael Moorer in the later rounds, because he said at that point in the fight, Michael would decide to stand right in front of him. Now, that prediction turned out to be absolutely true, And so, in retrospect, I can mark that down to is just, Foreman had so much experience. He knew how to read a person and read an opponent. He knew how to just ride those first, say, 8-9 rounds out and avoid getting KO'd by Moore, but just allow Moore to unload on him without enduring too much damage. Foreman was willing to give away those rounds on points because he knew he wasn't trying to win the fight on points. He was looking for that perfect KO. And indeed, in the 10th round, Foreman, I guess, realized that Moore was now going to stand in front of him, so he set him up with those sweeping left hooks to come in with that very short, straight right hand right on the button. That perfect short right just flattened Moore, and he was not able to beat the count. Now, that is not by any means a lucky punch. That is a punch that is set up from decades of experience in the ring. From that point on, I think George had perhaps a half dozen more pro bouts before finally hanging it up after a loss to Shannon Briggs. But no doubt the high points of Foreman's career were the Rumble in the Jungle, I would say his fight with Evander Holyfield, and then finally, of course, the biggest moment is just that KO of Michael Moore to become heavyweight champion of the world at age 45. Now, in parallel to his rise once again to the heavyweight champion of the world, George was also an incredible pitchman. I don't know anybody who didn't own a George Foreman grill. Did you buy one? I think I went through at least 2, maybe 3 George Foreman grills. I thought they were great for like chicken breasts, chicken cutlets, because all the fat would just run off, and also I liked using them for grilled cheese. I think George also he also represented White Castle with the hamburgers, a number of other endorsements. But at that point, he was such a different character than the character he was for the Rumble in the Jungle. George Foreman became this sort of jolly, grandfatherly-like figure. And then let's not forget George Foreman as a ringside commentator. I actually really appreciated his commentary sometimes more than the other non-boxing commentators or non-boxer commentators who sat ringside and gave their live insights into the boxing fights. In summary, I think that the reason I wanted to make this tribute about George Foreman is just more than his accomplishments in the ring. I think he stood for just the huge capacity of the human character and what one can make of oneself if one sets one's mind to doing something and one's heart and then devotes ourselves to God. We can accomplish anything. So rest in peace, George Foreman, and thank you so much for all the contributions you've made to us.